Before you scroll, stop. Because what you're about to hear might change the way you look at every single quarter for the rest of your life. Right now, somewhere in someone's pocket, someone's drawer, or someone's forgotten coin jar, there is a Washington quarter worth far more than anyone expects. And the craziest part? It looks completely ordinary. Some of the most valuable Washington quarters in history, the ones worth hundreds, thousands, even life-changing money, were discovered by people who had no idea what they were holding. People just like you. People who were one tiny detail away from spending a fortune without ever knowing it. And in this video, I'm going to reveal the exact errors, the hidden transitions, the secret minting flaws, and the overlooked features that decide whether your quarter is completely common or incredibly rare. But listen closely, because the one detail that changes everything, the single clue that determines value or no value, comes only at the very end of this video. If you miss that final detail, you could miss the chance to recognize a rare coin you already own. So stay right here, don't skip, and let the truth unfold slowly, because the next few minutes may reveal a treasure hiding in plain sight. Welcome to Coins Most Valuable, where ordinary coins become extraordinary discoveries, and subscribing ensures you never miss the next life-changing clue. Tonight you're about to go on a journey through one of the most misunderstood coins in American history. A coin that millions of people overlook, spend, ignore, toss into drawers, and drop into change cups without realizing the truth, without knowing the secrets, and without understanding how a simple 1965 Washington quarter, without a mint mark, became one of the strangest and most controversial coins ever released by the United States Mint. And I want you to stay with me until the end, because the biggest reveal, the one collectors never expect, comes in the final stretch of this video. And when you hear it, the entire story of the 1965 quarter is going to hit you differently. Let's start with the part that almost nobody talks about. The 1965 Washington quarter was born during a crisis. Not an ordinary crisis, but a crisis that changed American currency forever. Back in the early 1960s, the United States was experiencing a coin shortage unlike anything the country had ever seen. Banks were empty. Businesses were frustrated. Machines were drying up. And the mint kept insisting it was producing coins as fast as humanly possible. But the coins were still vanishing. People didn't understand what was happening. They blamed collectors, thinking collectors were hoarding coins. Politicians blamed the mint. The mint blamed silver. And the public had no idea that something historic was about to happen. Here's the truth. And this is the moment that always surprises viewers. The coin shortage wasn't caused by collectors at all. It was caused by silver itself. You see, quarters at the time were made of 90% silver. And as silver prices rose, the metal inside a quarter became almost as valuable as the coin's face value. People realized they could simply hoard or melt quarters for fast profit. And millions of quarters were disappearing from circulation every single month. Imagine how wild that is, a country running out of its own money because people were literally melting it. This is where the story of your 1965 quarter truly begins. Because in 1965, the United States government had to make a decision that would change American currency forever. They eliminated silver from the quarter entirely. They replaced it with a copper-nickel-clad metal. And they redesigned the entire minting process to keep up with exploding demand. But that still wasn't enough. The mint knew collectors loved mint marks. Collectors hunted for D mint marks, S mint marks, and rare variations between mints. And the mint believed collectors were causing people to remove too many coins from circulation. So in 1965, the mint made a shocking decision. They removed all mint marks. Yes, every single 1965 quarter has no mint mark. Not because it was made in Philadelphia, but because the mint didn't want anyone pulling coins from circulation based on rarity. This is one of the most important parts of the story, and it will matter later when we get to the rarest errors. But now let's deepen the story, because the mint wasn't just changing the metal. It was changing the entire production system. Workers were under enormous pressure. Machines were running full speed day and night. New copper-nickel planchets were being prepared. Silver planchets were being phased out. But here's where the chaos begins. The mint didn't mint coins by date. They minted them by urgency. This means something that shocks almost every collector who hears it. White heavy checkmark 1,964 quarters were still being minted in 1965. White heavy checkmark 1,965 quarters were still being minted in 1966. White heavy checkmark both silver and clad planchets were present in the same building at the same time. Think about how chaotic that is. Workers loading trays of blanks into machines. One tray filled with copper-nickel planchets. Another tray filled with leftover silver planchets. Machines switching from one composition to the next. Silver blanks being removed. Clad blanks being added. And the pressure to meet production demand building every day. And during this transition, something happened that the mint never wanted anyone to know about. A few leftover silver planchets slipped through the system. They were fed into the presses. They were struck with a 1965 date. And they escaped into circulation. These are the legendary 1965 silver transitional errors. And they are unbelievably rare. One of these sold for over $13,000 at auction. But that's not even the only valuable one. A perfectly preserved clad 1965 quarter, one of the finest known, sold for over $7,000. Think about how shocking that is. A common-looking clad quarter. A coin that millions of people spend daily. Worth over $7,000 just because it was preserved in stunning, almost flawless condition. But to understand why these values are possible, you need to go deeper into the psychology and history behind this coin. Because the 1965 Washington quarter wasn't just a coin. It was a symbol of change, a symbol of tension, a symbol of transition, and a symbol of a government that was struggling to control a crisis it could no longer manage. This is why collectors today find the 1965 quarter so fascinating. It marks the moment silver disappeared from American coinage. It marks the moment mint marks vanished. It marks the moment people accused collectors unfairly. It marks the moment hoarding reached historic levels. And it marks the moment when some of the rarest transitional errors were accidentally created. But now let's deepen the retention, because we're about to enter the part of the story that keeps viewers glued. The mint was terrified of making mistakes in 1965. They were terrified of mixing silver and clad. They were terrified of errors escaping. And they were terrified that collectors would discover something the mint didn't want them to know. But despite all the precautions, despite all the checks, despite all the warnings, errors still escaped. And not just silver errors. We're talking off-center strikes, double strikes, broad strikes, clipped planchets, transitional errors, wrong metal planchets, strikes on foreign coins, die adjustment strikes, missing edge details. These errors are rare in the 1965 series because the mint was trying so hard to avoid them. And when collectors find errors from a year when the mint wanted perfection, they pay huge premiums. This brings us to the next part of the story, the part collectors always remember. The 1965 quarter didn't just change American coinage. It changed the way people thought about money. Older Americans were furious that silver was removed. Collectors were shocked that mint marks had disappeared. People distrusted the new clad coins because they looked and sounded different. Banks received complaints. Vending machine companies had problems with the new metal. And people kept searching their change, hoping to find a leftover silver quarter. And here's the interesting part. That hope was not completely unrealistic. Because a tiny number of silver 1965 quarters actually did escape. And one of them eventually became the famous example that sold for over $13,000. But the biggest twist, the twist I promised from the beginning, the twist that shocks even experienced collectors, is this. The 1965 quarter is one of the only coins in U.S. history where the rarest, most valuable versions look completely normal at first glance. There is no error visible to the eye. There is no special design, no missing element. No doubling, no extra rim, no dramatic visual anomaly. The only difference is the metal composition. That means the rarest 1965 quarter in existence, the one worth over $13,000, can be sitting in someone's drawer, in someone's piggy bank, in someone's old jar of change. And they would never know unless they weighed it. That is the greatest mystery of the 1965 quarter. A coin that looks ordinary, feels ordinary, circulates like every other quarter. And yet, hidden within that ordinary appearance is the possibility of an error worth thousands of dollars. This is why collectors never overlook the 1965 quarter. Because every time you find one, every time you flip one over, every time you see that classic Washington portrait, you're looking at a coin from a year filled with chaos, confusion, controversy, and change. And the odds, tiny as they may be, mean that any one of those quarters could be a rare transitional error worth more than $13,000. And that is why the 1965 Washington quarter, without a mint mark, does not just belong to history, it belongs to legend. Now let's move to the next coin in this journey, a coin that looks unbelievably ordinary, but the more you understand its history, the more shocking it becomes. The 1972 Washington quarter, without a mint mark. A coin most people spend without a second glance. A coin that blends into circulation. A coin almost nobody pays attention to, yet it hides one of the most interesting stories of the entire 1970s coin era. And before we dive deeper, remember this. Just because something looks common doesn't mean it is. And the 1972 no mint mark quarter proves that better than almost any other modern coin. If you skip ahead, you will miss the detail that determines everything about this coin's value. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear will completely change the way you look at this date. Let me take you back for a moment. It's the early 1970s. The mint has fully transitioned away from silver. The coin shortage has eased, and circulation is stable again. But while people think everything is back to normal, behind the scenes, a new set of challenges is slowly building. Challenges that create some of the most unexpected errors in the Washington quarter series. And that brings us to 1972. This is a year where the mint was pushing production hard. Billions of coins were needed to meet national demand. Machines were running constantly, dies were wearing down faster than usual, and the push for quantity slowly began to affect quality. And that's the first part of what makes the 1972 quarter so interesting. Because unlike the dramatic silver-to-clad shift we saw in 1965, the story of 1972 is a story of pressure, where misalignment, die fatigue, and quiet mistakes that slipped out when nobody was looking. The 1972 Washington quarter, without a mint mark, was struck in Philadelphia. Philadelphia didn't use mint marks at the time, so every 1972 quarter made there has no mint mark. But what most people don't realize is that Philadelphia was producing coins at record speed. They were striking them so fast that the quality control wasn't always perfect. And those imperfections, those almost invisible errors, are exactly what create real value in this coin. But before we explore the rare errors, let's talk about what makes this coin so easy to overlook. Most 1972 quarters today are worn down, circulated heavily, and lost their sharpness decades ago. They're tired coins, faded rims, dull surfaces, weak lettering, and the deep scratches of everyday life. That makes high-quality survivors incredibly rare. Now listen closely, because this is the first hook you don't want to miss. A 1972 no mint mark quarter in exceptional condition. I'm talking flawless surfaces, strong strike, near perfect preservation. Can sell for hundreds of dollars. Some of the highest examples ever graded push into the upper hundreds. A few have sold for surprising four-figure amounts when they appeared in perfect condition. And that's not even the rare part. The rarest 1972 quarters are the errors, the mistakes, the coins that escaped the mint accidentally. And the thing about errors from this year is that many are subtle. They don't scream at you like a dramatic off-center strike. They whisper. They hide. And unless you slow down and understand the details, you'll miss every single one. Let's go deeper, because this is where the real story begins. The 1972 quarter is part of what collectors call a die fatigue era. Dies were used for longer than they should have been. Machines were pushed harder than they were supposed to be. And that leads to several important types of errors. One of the biggest mistakes collectors look for involves double dies. True double dies on 1972 quarters are extremely rare, but they do exist. And when they appear on letters, numbers, or the motto, collectors immediately pay attention. Imagine finding a doubled, "In God We Trust." Imagine a doubled liberty. Imagine a double date. Even slight doubling can push a coin's value dramatically higher. But there's more. Die cracks, die breaks, and cuds, pieces of the die breaking and leaving raised metal on the coin, appear on some 1972 quarters. Large, dramatic cuds can make a 1972 quarter worth serious money. Medium cracks can also bring premium prices. Collectors love them because they tell the story of a mint stretched thin. Now hold on to this next part, because this is one of the biggest twists in the entire 1972 quarter story. Philadelphia's quality control problems in the 1970s led to a unique type of error, the weak strike and the worn die strike. These coins look dull, mushy, soft, and people think they're worthless because of that. But in reality, certain weak strikes, especially the ones caused by worn dies rather than low pressure, are highly collectible and often overlooked in circulation. Think about that for a moment. A coin that looks bad can actually be rare. A coin that looks weak can actually be valuable. A coin that people reject can actually be the one collectors are searching for. This is why you should never dismiss a 1972 quarter at first glance. The details matter. The minting story matters. The physical condition matters. And the errors matter even more. Let's go even deeper into the errors, because this is where the real excitement begins. Off-center strikes from 1972, especially those with 30% or more off-center, but still showing the full date, can bring strong money. These dramatic mistakes happen when the blank isn't properly centered in the press, and they create some of the most visually striking errors you can find. Then we have clipped planchets, quarters, with a curved missing piece on the edge. These are caused by misfed metal strips. And because the mint was pushing production so aggressively in 1972, these clipped planchets appear more often than people realize. But the rare ones, the ones that bring serious value, are the double clips and triple clips. If a 1972 quarter somehow received multiple clips, it becomes incredibly desirable. Then there are broad strikes, coins struck without the collar, causing the rim to spread outward. These errors look strange, almost melted, and collectors immediately notice them. Now listen to this next part, because this is the twist that ties the entire year together. The mint wasn't aware at the time how many subtle errors were slipping through. The machines were aging. The dies were weakening. And for Philadelphia, which had no mint mark and was constantly pushing to meet demand, small mistakes were common. But here's what makes this year so valuable. Most of those mistakes blended into circulation before anyone noticed, meaning someone somewhere could still be holding a rare 1972 error without realizing it. And this is where I want you to pay close attention, because the final most important clue, the one that determines whether your 1972 no mint mark quarter is common or rare, comes near the end of this segment. Let's talk about the highest prices ever recorded for 1972 quarters. A perfect grade 1972 no mint mark quarter, with flawless surfaces, sold for several $100s. One example reached over $1,000 because of its condition. And some of the dramatic errors, especially off-centers and double clips, can reach strong 3-digit prices depending on quality. But one of the most surprising results came from a high-end example that wasn't an error at all. It was simply struck so cleanly, preserved so beautifully, that collectors bid aggressively on it. And that tells you something important. A rare 1972 quarter doesn't have to look rare. It doesn't have to have dramatic errors. Sometimes, perfection is the rarity. Now let's go deeper, because this is the part most people forget. 1972 is one of the years where the mint's machinery was undergoing subtle changes. Slight adjustments. Minor recalibrations. And those adjustments created micro-errors that collectors didn't even notice for years. These micro-errors, tiny shifts in alignment, minor die wear patterns, strange surface textures, are the ones collectors obsess over today. And they're hiding in plain sight. And here is the final twist, the one I told you about at the beginning. There is one detail, one physical trait, that separates the common 1972 quarter from the rare ones. And that detail can be the difference between 25 cents and hundreds of dollars. It is not the date. It is not the mint mark. It is not the design. It is not something you see at first glance. It is something you must learn to recognize. And once you do, you will never miss it again. And that detail will be revealed in the next part of this video. If you skip, you miss it. But if you stay, you will learn the one clue that can instantly tell you whether a 1972 quarter is common or rare. And that is why the 1972 Washington quarter, without a mint mark, remains a coin of mystery, value, and opportunity. Now let's continue. And now we move deeper into the series, into one of the most overlooked, but historically important coins of an entire decade, the 1967 Washington quarter with no mint mark. A coin that millions of people spent without a thought. A coin that blends into circulation so easily that most collectors never give it a second look. But behind this simple little date lies one of the most misunderstood episodes in U.S. mint history, a moment of transition, pressure, frustration, and decisions that still confuse new collectors today. Before we dive into the secrets of this coin, remember something important. Every coin tells a story. Some stories are loud, and some whisper quietly. The 1967 quarter is one of the quiet ones, a coin that hides massive historical weight behind an ordinary surface. And once you understand what the mint was dealing with during the mid-1960s, the 1967 quarter becomes far more fascinating than most people ever realize. Let's go back in time for a moment. It's the mid-1960s. The mint has just removed silver from the quarter. The coin shortage of 1964 to 1965 has finally started to calm down, but the memory of that panic still hangs over the entire coin production system. The mint is terrified, absolutely terrified, that collectors and the public will start hoarding coins again. And because of this fear, the mint made a controversial decision. From 1965 through 1967, the mint completely removed all mint marks from U.S. quarters. None for Philadelphia. None for Denver. None for San Francisco. Just like the 1965 and 1966 quarters, the 1967 Washington quarter has no mint mark, not because it came from Philadelphia, but because the government was desperate to prevent hoarding. This detail is extremely important, and it shapes everything about this coin. Because the mint believed that if people knew which mint made the coins, if they saw a D or an S, they would hoard specific mint locations and restart the national shortage. So they removed every mint mark, forced coins into circulation quickly, and tried to stabilize the country's coin supply. But here's where the story gets deeper. 1967 was a year of experimentation at the mint, a year of trial and error, a year when the mint was still learning how to perfect the copper-nickel-clad coinage introduced just 2 years earlier. Machines were being adjusted. Die pressure was being tested. Metal blanks were being refined. And all of this behind-the-scenes experimentation created a surprising number of subtle and sometimes dramatic minting mistakes. And those mistakes, those quiet, almost invisible mistakes, are exactly what make the 1967 quarter valuable today. Stay with me, because the rarest errors of this date do not look rare at first glance. If you skip ahead, you will miss the critical details that decide whether your 1967 quarter is 25 cents or a treasure collector's chase. Let's continue. The first thing you need to understand about the 1967 quarter is that although millions were produced, almost none of them survived in high condition. This is because nearly every coin struck in 1967 was rushed into circulation. The mint did not sell coins to collectors. They did not produce uncirculated sets for the public. In fact, collector sets were canceled from 1965 through 1967 to prevent hoarding. This means something extremely important. High-grade 1967 quarters are rare, genuinely rare, because they were never saved at the time they were made. People spent them instantly. They lived harsh lives in circulation. They were never protected, and decades of use worn them down. So when a crisp, sharp, perfectly struck 1967 quarter shows up today, collectors take notice. That's why the highest graded examples of the 1967 quarter have sold for strong money. One near-perfect 1967 quarter shocked collectors when it sold for over $1,000, simply because of how well it survived. But the rarity of high-grade survivors is only the beginning. Now we enter the real secret world, the errors. Because the mint was still adjusting to clad coinage in 1967, errors were more common than the public realized. And the most dramatic ones can be extremely valuable today. Listen carefully, because every detail matters. The 1967 quarter is known for white heavy checkmark off-center strikes, white heavy checkmark broad strikes, white heavy checkmark missing edge reads, white heavy checkmark broken die cuts, white heavy checkmark large die cracks, white heavy checkmark partial collar strikes, white heavy checkmark clip planchets, white heavy checkmark struck through errors, white heavy checkmark weak strikes from poor die pressure, white heavy checkmark rare double dies. Some of these mistakes can be worth tens or even hundreds of dollars, but some of the large, dramatic errors can reach several hundred depending on severity. But there is one category of error that makes this coin truly fascinating. The coins that carry die breaks and cuts from this year are especially desirable. Because the mint was pushing machinery aggressively, dies broke more often. When a piece of the die breaks off, the coin develops a raised blob of metal known as a cud. Large cuds on 1967 quarters can be extremely valuable. But the most desirable examples are the ones where the cud or crack affects the date, the rim, or the portrait. Now, let's talk about doubling. True double dies on 1967 quarters are rare, but when they appear, they are taken very seriously. Doubling on In God We Trust, or the date or liberty, can increase value significantly. Even moderate doubling can bring premiums. But here is where the story gets even deeper. 1967 is part of what collectors call the experimental pressure era. The mint was still testing the ideal striking pressure for the clad metal. Too high, and the dies cracked. Too low, and the design struck weak. This led to a series of weak strikes that many people mistake for worn coins. But true weak strikes caused by light pressure, not circulation, are rare and collectible. And many collectors don't even know these exist. This is why you should always examine a 1967 quarter carefully. Not all weak-looking coins are damaged. Some are mint errors. But now let's move into the twist, because every coin we've talked about has had one key moment, one key reveal, one final detail that changes everything. Here's the twist for 1967. A small number of 1,967 quarters were struck using dies that carried leftover characteristics from 1966. These transitional die markers are extremely rare. Some show unusual metal flow lines, others show alignment anomalies, and a few show faint doubling or texture differences caused by adjustments during die creation. These tiny details, invisible to the average person, are what separate the common 1967 quarter from the rare collectible. And the most incredible part? These rare die varieties blend perfectly into circulation. They look ordinary to nearly everyone. Their rarity is hidden beneath subtle surfaces. And the only way to spot them is to slow down and look carefully for characteristics most people will never notice. Now let's talk about the highest price ever paid for a 1967 quarter. One of the most remarkable 1967 no-mint mark quarters sold for more than $8,000 at auction because it was preserved in nearly flawless condition. Not because it was an error, not because it had doubling, but because perfect condition is nearly impossible for this date. And this brings us to the lesson of coin number 3. Rarity does not always come from a dramatic mistake. Sometimes rarity comes from survival, from condition, from a coin that made it through decades without being beaten and worn. But now we reach the most important moment of this entire section. The final twist that ties everything together. There is one detail, one single trait, that determines whether your 1967 quarter is common or special. It is subtle. It is easy to miss. And it separates the ordinary from the valuable. It is not the date. It is not the mint mark. It is not the metal. And it is not the errors we listed earlier. This single clue will be revealed in the next segment, and it will completely change how you evaluate every 1967 quarter you ever touch again. If you skip ahead, you will miss the detail collectors spend years trying to understand. But if you stay, you will learn the key to unlocking the secrets of this overlooked coin. Now, let's continue our journey. Now we're moving into the story of the 1998 Washington quarter dollar with a D mint mark, a coin millions of Americans have held in their hands without thinking twice, a coin that still shows up in circulation today, and a coin that many people assume is completely ordinary. But if you've learned anything from collecting Washington quarters, it's that even the most modern-looking coins can hold value, hold history, and hold small details that separate an everyday pocket change quarter from a collectible worth far more than 25 cents. And the 1998 D Washington quarter is one of those coins that deserves a closer look because this coin is valuable when the right combination of condition, strike, surface quality, and rarity comes together. When you pick up a 1998 D quarter, the very first thing that stands out is how familiar it feels. It has the same design we memorized growing up, Washington's profile on the obverse and the eagle on the reverse, the final years before the U.S. Mint completely transformed the series with the 50-state quarters program. But under that familiar design are differences in detail, differences in mint quality, and differences in luster that can dramatically separate a valuable 1998 D quarter from a worn, circulated one. The story of this coin lies in its condition, its strike, and its ability to survive for more than 2 decades with very little wear. Most 1998 Washington quarters with the D mint mark were used and reused without a second thought. They passed through stores, gas stations, parking meters, toll booths, school lunchrooms, and cash registers everywhere. And that heavy circulation created the kind of wear we expect. Softened lettering, weaker strike lines on Liberty's profile, flatter feathers on the eagle, and small surface scratches from years of handling. But a small number of these quarters survived in exceptional state. Those coins, the ones with extremely sharp details, bright original mint luster, and no distracting marks, are the coins collectors pay attention to. These are the coins that prove the 1998 D quarter can be valuable. When you begin examining this coin closely, the D mint mark becomes important. A strong, clear, sharp mint mark helps indicate the coin was struck well and preserved well. On the obverse, the hair details above Washington's forehead, the curl above the ear, and the separation of the strands are major indicators of strike quality on the 1998 D quarter. On the reverse, the depth of the eagle's wing feathers, the clarity of the arrows, and the texture of the body all tell you how well the coin was struck and how well it survived. Collectors look closely at the rim on this coin, the reeded edge, because a sharp, well-defined rim shows that the coin didn't spend years rattling around in pockets and machinery. A strong rim combined with full luster is a key indicator of higher value. And even though this coin is modern, the details on the 1998 D quarter can vary more than people realize. Some examples have slightly softer strikes, especially around the neck and eagle's tail area, while others show crisp, bold relief. These differences matter because collectors pay for the very best examples. The surface of the 1998 D quarter often tells the story of where it's been. Circulated coins may have scratches or small contact marks, while uncirculated examples show a clean, frosty sheen across the fields and devices. The luster on a well-preserved example rolls beautifully across the coin when tilted under light. That luster, that shine, is what often distinguishes a 25-cent coin from a coin that sells for hundreds. Now let's talk about errors and variations, because even modern Denver minted coins occasionally have small production quirks. Some 1998 D quarters have faint die cracks or micro-doubling on the date or on the motto, "In God We Trust." Others show slight misalignment or unusual metal flow lines on the obverse and reverse. While these variations are not extremely dramatic, Collectors love coins that show small differences. These variations don't show up every day, but when they do, they elevate interest. But the biggest value factor for the 1998 D. Washington quarter is grading, the difference between a circulated coin and a nearly flawless example. And here is where this coin becomes truly interesting. Most people think modern quarters never sell for high prices, but the best of the best examples in top-tier condition have already proven otherwise. The highest price ever recorded at auction for a 1998 D. Washington quarter was $288, achieved for a stunning MS-67 graded example. That price shows that this coin is valuable when it reaches that extremely high level of preservation. That auction result tells collectors something important. Even modern coins can carry strong value when they survive in exceptional condition. And because so many 1998 D quarters entered circulation immediately, finding a pristine example today is much harder than people think. That is why collectors search rolls, examine change, and check every detail under magnification. A 1998 D quarter with full luster, no contact marks, a strong strike, and perfect surfaces becomes a standout coin. As you study this quarter, look closely at the fields, the open areas of the coin. Look for clarity, smoothness, and original texture. On a high-grade example, the fields appear almost glossy but not polished, reflecting the natural finish of the mint's production. Scanner-sharp letters, strong relief on the devices, and frosty luster all contribute to higher desirability. The reverse eagle on the 1998 D quarter also holds clues. In high-quality examples, the feathers appear layered and deep. The talons, arrows, and olive branches show separation and detail. Under magnification, you see the fine lines that carry across the wings, lines that quickly fade as coins circulate. A bold eagle is one of the most valuable signs of a strong strike. Now imagine this coin surviving more than 25 years without losing those precise qualities. Imagine it escaping scratches, avoiding pockets filled with keys and coins, staying out of machines, and never touching rough surfaces. That kind of survival is exactly why the best examples draw interest, and why this coin is valuable when preserved well. Collectors also pay attention to natural toning on this coin. Some 1998 D quarters develop soft golden or light blue toning around the edges, giving the coin character and sometimes enhancing eye appeal. This natural toning can increase value when it occurs evenly across the surface. The 1998 D Washington quarter stands out for another reason as well. It represents the last full year before the revolutionary 50-state quarter designs began in 1999. That means this coin marks the end of an era, the end of the classic eagle reverse. Coins struck during transition periods often gain additional collector interest, and the 1998 D quarter is no exception. So when you hold this quarter, you're holding more than a piece of change. You're holding the final chapter of the classic Washington quarter era before one of the biggest changes in U.S. coin history. You're holding the product of the Denver Mint's late 1990s craftsmanship. And if your coin is one of the few that survived in incredible condition, then you're holding a coin that truly can be valuable, a coin that has already proven its worth in auction history. Every collector who examines a 1998 D Washington quarter looks for the same things: sharpness, luster, preservation, surface quality, and historical significance. When those things come together, this coin transforms from ordinary to exceptional. And that is why the 1998 D Washington quarter dollar remains a coin worth checking, worth studying, and worth searching for, even today. Before you click away, I want you to hear something that almost nobody knows. Everything you saw in this video, every rare quarter, every secret, every twist, was just the surface. Because the coin that hides the most unbelievable mistake, the most unexpected value, and the most shocking discovery in modern American change isn't a quarter at all. It's a nickel. A Jefferson nickel, so ordinary, so plain, so invisible that people spend it every day without ever looking at it. And yet one of these nickels, one that looked no different from the others, sold for more money than a brand new car. Because of a detail so small that the owner didn't notice it for years. And here's the part that keeps collectors awake at night. The rarest Jefferson nickel ever discovered was found by accident. Not by a dealer. Not by an expert. Not by a collector. It was found by a regular person like you in their pocket on an ordinary day in the middle of an ordinary moment. That's why you cannot stop here. If you do, you might walk right past the most valuable coin you'll ever touch in your life. Because the next video, the Jefferson Nichols video, reveals the mistake the mint never wanted to admit, the year almost nobody checks, and the microscopic detail that turns a simple nickel into something worth a fortune. Don't break the chain now. Go to the next video right now, because the biggest secret in pocket change history is waiting just one click away. And once you see it, you will never ignore a nickel again. Let's go uncover it together.